You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
The Southbank Undercroft is a space under the Queen Elizabeth Hall at the Southbank Centre that has been very popular with skateboarders and graffiti artists for over 4 decades, often touted as a global destination for skateboarders. The Undercroft was completed in the 1960s and became popular with skateboarders who've been present there since around 1973 when they creatively adapted the space. By the time of the 1980s, the Undercroft had become the centre of the skateboarding scene in the UK, and skateboarders from across the country and even the world visited the space. Since then, it has become the oldest and arguably one of the most famous, consistently skateboarded spaces in the world. The Undercroft is now considered the birthplace of British skateboarding and has been home to the skateboarders as well as BMX riders and graffiti artists and writers for over 4 decades. The tricks that skateboarders have made within the space are felt in the very fabric of the Undercroft itself, with chips and scratches made across decades etched into the concrete and bearing the marks of generations of skateboarders. However, the fact that the Undercroft was not planned for skateboarders means that it is considered a particularly difficult space to skateboard in, adding to its uniqueness and leading to its high notoriety. Over the years, the space has also become covered and recovered in graffiti, often on a daily basis, and adding to the unique setting of its character. The not-for-profit organisation Long Live Southbank has said that it is a space which at first glance some would dismiss. It is not often a space so graffiti-covered makes claims at heritage, its artworks unpreserved and unpreservable, holding layers and layers of paint, which have become a landmark piece of artwork. Long Live Southbank have further added that it is akin to modern-day cave painting, the owners of which are lost in a pool of thousands of other artists, each making their mark. As the Undercroft has no opening times and is located undercover as its name suggests, it proved to be the perfect place for skateboarders and urban enthusiasts to hang out during the day and in the evening. Over the years, it has been covered and recovered in graffiti and contains work created by thousands of artists over the years. The history of the Undercroft was made even more famous by Winston Whitter's documentary Rollin Through the Decades from 2005, which focused on the history of UK skateboarding from the 1970s to the mid-2000s. Rich Holland, a skateboarder who has been visiting the Undercroft since he was 12, told the Guardian newspaper in 2004, "It's a leftover space no one knew what to do with, and the skateboarders have transformed it. If they weren't there, it would be dead. It wouldn't be any space." In the early decades, the Undercroft became a site of contestation between the skateboarders and the Southbank Centre above, and the skateboarders' Undercroft began to be considered a nuisance by some. Anti-skateboarding measures were introduced in the 1990s, which included drilling into the ground to roughen the surface, and areas of the Undercroft began to be gradually closed. In 2013, a campaign was launched by Long Live Southbank, a non-profit organisation to save the Southbank Undercroft skate park after the space was threatened by closure. Just a year later, in September 2014, the Undercroft had been saved due to the campaign and the high level of public support that it received, and there was even a legal guarantee for its long-term future. The campaign to save the Undercroft came after the publication of plans for a £120 million development for the festival wing by the Southbank Centre, redeveloping the brutalist 1960s buildings that included the Hayward Gallery, the Queen Elizabeth Hall, and the Purcell Room, with a visually eye-catching proposal for a glass pavilion that would float above the complex and also include cafes, shops, and restaurants. However, the intended plan would have resulted in the Undercroft being closed to skateboarders and current users. An alternative space had been suggested by the Southbank Centre, moving the skateboarders 120 metres further along the Thames to a space under the Hungerford Bridge, with the plan from Søren Nordahl and of Oldson considered one of the top architects for designing skateboarding and urban art spaces. However, this was felt to be a greatly different space and one which lacked the heritage and unique dynamic architecture of the Undercroft. Meanwhile, the artistic director of the National Theatre, Nicholas Hittner, and Catherine Croft, director of the 20th Century Society, felt that the plan also needed rethinking at the time, querying the sheer scale of the new build, which would then cut off the Southbank Centre from the National Theatre, whilst also agreeing that the proposed plans didn't consider the communal value of the Undercroft space for the skateboarders and graffiti artists who had been frequenting it for decades. The disagreement over the future of the Undercroft lasted for 17 months, and the skateboarders were even backed by the then London Mayor Boris Johnson, and Lambeth Council received over 27,000 objections to the centre's planning application. Johnson said at the time, "The skate park is the epicentre of UK skateboarding and is part of the cultural fabric of London. This much-loved community space has been used by thousands of young people over the years. It attracts tourists from across the world and undoubtedly adds to the vibrancy of the area. It helps to make London the great city it is." It was also felt that getting rid of the Undercroft as a skating centre would close a space which gave young people something creative to do and to spend their time both safely and freely. Long Live Southbank stated in an article with Historic England in 2018, "This is one of the world's most significant skateboarding spots, highly influential to thousands across the globe. Spanning far beyond skateboarding, it affects and directs the world from fashion to photography, street art to architecture. It is a self-determining space of unrestricted creativity, a community-led hub and hive of artistic energy." Eventually, in agreement with Long Live Southbank, the festival wing proposals were withdrawn by the Southbank Centre. In reaction to this, the leader of Lambeth Council, Lib Peck, stated, "I am pleased that Lambeth Council was able to work with both sides and find an imaginative solution to resolve this. Shared public space in London is precious, and Southbank Centre is a great asset to the country's cultural life. This agreement is a sensible way of protecting both, and we can all now look forward." Over the years, the relationship between the Southbank Centre and Long Live Southbank has improved, and a proposal was launched to restore famous sections of the skate spot which have been unused since 2004. By July 2019, 426 square metres of space were publicly opened after a successful fundraising campaign as a new space for skating, BMXing, graffiti writing, and other urban activities, thus increasing the creative space available on the south bank of the Thames. Long Live Southbank worked in collaboration with the Southbank Centre and London-based architect Field and Clegg Bradley Studios to not only maintain the space, but to also expand it, with the designs reflecting on the heritage of the 1970s skateboard era. After the Long Live Southbank's technical designs were finalised, and Lambeth Council gave planning consent for the restoration, iconic parts of the Undercroft were restored, many of which had been closed off for over a decade. Long Live Southbank felt that the project to restore sections of the Undercroft, which had been closed away from 2004, would function as a self-initiated restoration of tangible and intangible aspects of the built environment by its residents, with the aim to reclaim and develop an eroded atmosphere.